All right, another Meta Performance podcast. We're talking about being happy and achieving results and all the good stuff in life. I have my wing person here, Holly from Meta Performance. How's it going?
Going good. Happy to be here with our guest.
Is that because you're in Allentown and you're happy to do anything else, or just, you're happy
It's
to
not
talk
that
to Maria?
bad. It's not that
Okay.
bad.
Maria Colacurcio is here. How's it going?
Hi. It's going well. Thanks for having me.
And I should have asked, are you out west?
I am. I'm in the Seattle area.
Okay. Well, I knew kind of where you
Beautiful
live.
gray skies here, sprinkle of rain, dark at 4, amazing.
I think that's all of us are above the Mason-Dixon line. We're all having that dark at 4, how good is your headlamp type of season right now.
Yep.
So that I don't screw it up, to start with, give us your background, kind of where you're at now professionally, but also kind of what you got going on with sport and everything else.
Thank you. Let's see. So professionally, way back when, grew up in a family where my grandparents came over from Italy. So I say that only because it was really important to my dad that we get a college education. And from our birth, we were sort of the first generation in the big family. He was the youngest of 9, grew up on a farm to get a college education. And that really mattered to him. And I think that's really been a part of the ethos of effort and work ethic that's been applied across my life to things professionally and family and fitness. So I think when you look at yourself, those things come from somewhere deep. And over time, I've identified that that's a big part of where mine comes from. It was just really hard work was really important to him. So went to college, actually majored in history, which is very strange because I am now the CEO of a tech company. And most of my career has been spent in either early stage startups or in places like Microsoft. I co-founded a company called Smartsheet that went public, spent time at a bunch of early stage, mid stage tech companies, and I'm now at Syndio as CEO. And it's interesting from the perspective of your journey is very nonlinear. And I think my journey in all things has been very nonlinear from, working in museums and studying history and poli-sci to now being in tech. Similarly, in fitness, I played all kinds of sports when I was a kid. And when I was in high school, I didn't do any sports in college. In college, I went to college on vocal scholarships for singing and was really focused on that. So through college, all my free time, I was either working in a restaurant to kind of help pay my expenditures and in choirs. So in order to keep your scholarship, you had to be in, the big chorale and the little choir and the jazz choir and the jazz combo. So I didn't do a ton of athletics. I always was kind of a runner, did my little running, my 3-mile runs or whatever, but didn't really get into any sort of level of competition outside of high school sports until adulthood. So again, sort of this nonlinear journey. All that to say that if I were to sum up my background, it really is a story of see a crack in a door and you want to kick it open and go through, and you have no business kicking that door open and going through, but you do it anyway. I think it can be just an interesting exercise for folks who might not be on the path that they want to be and how they can go explore paths that aren't necessarily open to them. So now I compete in high rocks competitions. That's sort of my sport of choice. I think it's super fun. I started doing it in 2022 with my husband, who owns a gym in Seattle. And it was really, when we started, it was about bringing people back to the gym. So he had a physical space. And during COVID, it was really, really tough on small business owners. The population had sort of bifurcated, spread out. We had a really great community. They were all in their basements doing Peloton. We built our own home garage gym. So he looked at me at one point and was like, if you're not coming to the gym, like we've got problems, because it's actually a financial incentive for you and you work out in your garage. So we found High Rocks, and it was very much in its early innings, and used it as a way to start driving people back to the gym with the inspiration of something to train for. And it really worked, and now has since taken off. But that was kind of the beginning. That was all over the place. I hope that at least.
That's great. So I'm going to frame it up a little more in a second. Different than the others. I always like a speed round because it kind of brings in some other normal stuff. So are you a coffee or tea drinker?
Oh my God, coffee. I make a French press every morning at.
Are you a coffee snob, like the type of beans and the whatever? Or are you
I feel like this was intentional shade that you practiced and knew about before this. No, I worked at Starbucks for 4 years at HQ in comms. And yes, I am a snob. We would do coffee tastings before our meetings. So you would go around and you would sniff, and whoever called the meeting would be like, today we're drinking Sumatra, and it's from the region it was from. Anyway, so yes, I'm full blown Sumatra beans. I grind them fresh. I make the French press. Kind
So
of
to be fair, Maria, I did not know that, but I will throw shade later about it. But now I
Yeah.
know.
I'm going to jump in really quick. I love that. We actually roast green coffee beans. So we source them from small farms, usually in South America and other areas, Africa. And yeah, roast about 8 to 10 ounces at a time at home, because also love to geek out on the coffee.
So I don't know. So
Fun.
as hippie redneck as people will put me in that bucket, Maria, I get the green beans a lot of times now that we're home, because you can basically roast them in your toaster oven in one little thing about the size that you grind. So like legit do the whole little thing. I do have the other, in a hurry, but I'm totally on board with that too. If that be
See,
time.
we're all into coffee. We didn't even know it.
No,
That.
see, no
Friendship.
tea. What's your favorite track workout?
God, they're
Or
all
most effective if you just hate going to the track?
So I love doing 3Ks. For the sport that I'm in, I think 3Ks are just absolutely brutal. And they're that interesting, not long distance, not short distance, but like the distance where you really have to train your governor. And that to me has been a journey in terms of like telling your governor to back off, like you're going to keep going and you're not going to quit and you're going to keep the pace where it is. It's just a great mental distance for me. I love the 10K time trial, love hate. I just think it's a great way to see how you're progressing. But like as a workout, I would say the 3K workout is a good one.
You have a weekend away magically with nothing else to do. Posh weekend away, or you camping in the woods?
Am I by myself?
Sure.
I think I definitely go.
By the way, that's a true mom moment right there. Are you by yourself? Yes. I have no idea what just happened that I'm by myself or what.
I don't know why I'm by myself. I have 7 kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ages 5 to 18. And so the idea of being by myself, I don't know what's happening. Like clearly the world ended and everyone's like in hiding or something. I think I go posh. I would probably like work out twice a day, drink coffee. This is like when my husband and I go away, we laugh because we are clearly meant to be together because no one else would enjoy our weekends away. We'll go somewhere like beautiful and really nice. And it'll be like, get up, have coffee, do a workout, walk around, see the city, have more coffee, do another workout. But we love it. So it would probably be similar, but just alone. And then I would be texting him like, having my second coffee. What should I do for my second workout?
You have, I think I know the answer to one of these, but what's your favorite and least favorite parts of High Rocks? I think I know the least.
It's such a brutal race. It's funny. The sled pull used to be my least favorite because it's so difficult for me because I'm a small person and that it's just a really heavy, I compete in individual pro and mixed doubles. So that's a, 237-pound sled you're pulling. And I really tried to make that weakness a strength though by training it. And so now I'm finally getting to a point where when I get to that station, I want to dominate it because I've worked so hard on it. So it's still my least favorite, but it's getting a little bit more palatable.
And then the last one, the, really important one, are you crunchy or creamy peanut butter?
100% crunchy. Huge debate in my house, by the way. Huge debate. And there's like vectors to this debate. There's the almond peanut butter debate. Lots of passion around that. And then there's the crunchy creamy.
So as we frame up, because we want to talk about, or I want you to start with, how do you like set your goals with everything going on? Because you are CEO of a company that's growing. You compete, globally for High Rocks, 70 kids. And actually I know there's 7 kids, some of which I know are like national at cheer and doing other stuff. So you add any of that up and it's pretty mind blowing. And so for me, it's like, how do you actually decide how to set your goals around all of those things and hopefully try to be happy?
Yeah, I appreciate the question because it does take a lot of intention. So one thing we do that I started doing when my kids were little is on January 1st, so New Year's Day, we make these lists that we call our more or less lists. And you cut a piece of paper in half and on one side you put more and the other side you put less and you write down. And they were so young when we started it that we would draw pictures. And it's basically, what do I want more of this year? What do I want less of? And what's funny, and I had this up because I thought you might ask something about this. This is a picture my daughter just sent me from college. She got her girlfriend that lives in her dorm and she was like, let's go make our more or less list. So they did it together. So it's sort of this ingrained ritual. And whether you stick to it or not is not the point. The point is that you take a moment, and it's not really like a resolution. It's more broad, because in the macro thinking, you're trying to figure out, what are your priorities and what are you going to try to infuse, which is where people tend to focus on the resolutions. But what I always feel like is it has to be a balance. Something has to give and be taken away in order to have that balance. So that's where I start. And then for me, I just have some principles that are overarching always. Like, family will always be my number one priority in terms of thinking about the health, safety, wellness, happiness of my family, but it looks different than what people think. And I'll give you kind of a tip that for me was really helpful as a mom of 7 that hopefully will be helpful to others, which is you have to ask your kids what matters to them versus presuming. And so for me, and my sister has 6 kids, so this is just something in big families, you have to have conversations that might not happen naturally when you have 2 kids or 3 kids. And what I mean by that is a lot of my kids do sports. And so before a season starts, I always sit down with them and I say, what does it mean to you in this season to feel loved, to feel seen, to feel supported by me as mom and Brandon, if it's the 5 kids from my first marriage or with the 2 littles that we share? And the answers always surprise me. So for my twins, I have identical 17-year-old twins. They do competitive cheer. It's 6 or 7 weekends a year, and it's all in. It's 2.5 minutes. And they're like, we need you two in the audience every single time. If we don't make eye contact with you and Brandon before we perform, we will not do well. Very clear. My son, who runs cross country and does swim, he's like, I don't know, if you could come to like half my meets, that would be cool. My son that plays soccer and has 60 games a year, he's super chill. He's like, if you can make it, great. Like, I really want you to be there when I score. I understand that it's difficult for you to plan on being there when I score, but half the game seems about reasonable. So long story short, when you have those conversations, it becomes very clear, like, what matters to whom and why. My oldest daughter, who played volleyball, it's her junior year. She was still on the sort of freshman JV team. And she actually said to me, you're coming to more games than makes me feel comfortable, because I'm literally doing this just to check a box for college. And I feel like you're taking your valuable time to be watching something that I'm not putting my heart and soul into. So I'd actually prefer you don't show up. And those things, you don't get that input without the conversation. So I think it's a long way of saying, like, that is how I approach prioritization. It's like finding out the person on the other end of the line, like, what do they need? And then going from there.
How do you set your professional goals? Because I think for me, so family's always been, when I coach athletes, that's always number one, right? And I actually get a little concerned if it's not. Like, I haven't had that yet, but I could just see them being like, yeah, I don't care. I'd be like, I don't know what's going to happen next. How do you set your goals and how fluid are they? Because I think, do you set them annually or every couple of years? Because I think, again, you have so many kids and you have different stages in life, like the amount of time that you can put in or your expectations, do they change? And then how do you let them change?
Yeah, I think, anyone that's out there that's been involved in a startup, we're kind of post Series C, work is all in. And I think you are always 100% on the clock, particularly as CEO. The buck stops with you, and the work time, the time you put into work is never ending. And even when you're not working, you're back processing on work. So to me, it's all about, it's very similar to fitness in that you put in the active work, but then you need the absorption. And so remembering that if you're on Zoom meetings for 3 hours and then you just push yourself to be on 3 hours more of Zoom meetings, you've just completely made inefficient the second half of your day. Versus if I go for a run or ride the bike, I'm going to back process and absorb all of those things that just occurred and probably have many more great and brilliant ideas that I can put back into the business because I gave myself absorption time. I consider that time when I'm working out in the middle of the day, in the early morning, in a weird break at 3 p.m. because I've got a window, that's still working. And I think that's the notion that high-level productive folks have started to realize, is that if I'm moving my body, I'm absorbing so much more of the work that's been done, and I'm actually capitalizing and growing on it. I'm compounding it. And that's why, to me, my work schedule is so fluid. It's just, you're always on, you're always in it. And so how do you build in time to actually absorb all of that work and compound on the creativity.
Love what you said, compounding, that those times off the computer screen when you're physically moving is compounding the work that you've already done. It's not a pause. It's not a stop. It's actually a value add. And I know a lot of people listening may be like, hey, that sounds great, but they're so driven in assuming that if they're not at work at the desk for an hour, they're losing an hour. They're not compounding anything. Was there any kind of mindset shift or strategy that allowed you to radically accept the value in doing things a little differently?
Yes, I actually had a notebook and I started keeping track of when I got my most transformational ideas. And it was always when I was moving, every single time. And something happens to my brain when I'm moving my body where I start to unlock areas that are the innovative pieces, the parts that get ideas, the parts that get to creativity. And to me, it's something that I try to model for my team because it's so important. And when you think about an organization that's remote or hybrid, you cannot spend all your time on Zoom because you are going to absolutely degrade the level of innovation you need to win. The other thing I did a couple of months ago that has been transformational is I used AI. This is where AI is really, really powerful to analyze all of my ELT leadership meeting notes and transcripts as to meetings that we had been having over the past 6 months. And I got into a pretty deep strategic conversation that spanned several weeks with AI about what do you notice about our meetings? And what was really powerful and interesting that you don't see if you just do this sort of one-off, but being able to take a bunch of information and analyze it, you rehash a lot of stuff. It seems like you're coming to the table to get consensus. You're not making decisions. It feels like leaders are actually leveraging this time to have conversations with each other that they could be having ahead of time so that these meetings are focused on decisions. So from that work, I split our meetings into 2 meetings a week that were much shorter. One focused on the operational running of the business, which is our Monday meeting, and one focused on strategy, which is what are the philosophies and things we want to change about the business that are going to take some strategic thought, effort, and change management. And every week, we analyze how well we're doing against those goals. We look at success criteria for each meeting. We have really clear rubric as how to run those meetings. And if you look at the total quantum time savings, we've cut them from hours to each one is now 90 minutes long. So it's things like that. It's like just because you're spending time on Zoom doesn't mean it's productive. Doesn't mean you're making decisions. Doesn't mean you're actually being efficient or driving innovation or strategy through your business.
It's interesting you say that because I don't know when it happened, Holly, but I know it's over time. I think there's different purposes for when you go out, right? There's the knowing how many hours in a row I can take of meetings in a row, right? And there's like, so I will build a buffer in because I know for me personally, 3 hours is kind of like if I need a break of some kind and then to go refresh and come back out. And then for the running and going out, I like the idea, Maria, that, you're pulling information. So there's sometimes you just go out because I need to get out. There's sometimes I go out with a premise, and I guess I never put it together until you said it, Maria, where it's like, I need to go think on this. And the best way for me to think on it is somewhere where I'm going out and I don't, I can think on it, right? One, no one can, I figured the day someone shows up in the middle of my run, it's pretty important. I'll talk to them if they can find me in the middle of the run. The other one, though, I do sometimes is I'll go trail running, on purpose trail running, because if I think about anything else besides trail running, I end up on my face. And I need that time to actually a little bit more check out. Like I need to actually not process and compound something. I need to give my brain a total break. And trail running, if you've spent much time, in the trails, the moment you don't think about the trail is the moment you're picking yourself up.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. It's so similar to training. So right now in the High Rocks community, because the sport is blowing up and is getting so much attention on social media, people's training plans are getting insane. Like people are training 20, 30, 40 hours a week. And what I think is really parallel here is that you've got to take recovery so your body can absorb the work. And it's true for both. And it's true in such powerful ways. I completely reset my training this year and went back to the fundamentals of strength and conditioning, totally non-High Rock specific, because I was just getting myself burnt out on these race specific movements. And it was like my body just needed to remember how to be strong and fast. And there's like very well researched ways to do those things. So going back to the basics and then applying that later to your specific sport, it's the same thing with work. It's like if we're constantly getting into the code switching and you're doing a strategic meeting and then you're in the details and then you're getting myopic and then you're pushing something forward and you don't give yourself a chance to absorb the macro and like, what does this really mean for the business and how we're actually driving prioritization? You can just, it's just a road to plateau.
I'm noticing a theme with a lot of what you're sharing, Maria, which is really fascinating. And I'm glad that you're really kind of bouncing from personal to professional and life and all the things and these themes. And what's really coming through is starting with clarity and clarifying a goal or an intention that's important to achieve for a thing, for returning to baseline, getting stronger, being more strategic and value based with your time, and then underlining it with hard work. So being clear on the goals and what matters, and then working hard towards them. And really, it sounds like cutting everything else out, but being able to really stand by the goals that you've made and being willing to let go. And again, I love that exercise that you shared that you do with your family, which is simple, but probably really difficult to actually do.
Yeah, I think it's so critical. And to pull in a theme that we haven't talked about yet, but I know you talked about at the top, which is happiness. It would be so easy to be doing all of these things and juggling all these balls and be absolutely miserable. And I've definitely had moments and phases in my life where these three strains, whether you call it sort of family, professional, and fitness, collide into a world in which you're just burnt out, burning the candle at both ends, and completely miserable. And I think the thing that's really helped me there is you have to find joy and productivity in the process. It's almost like that stoic mindset of the process is the goal. And I think as we get older, that just becomes more acute to me because I tend to fold laundry while I'm listening to a podcast. And it's like one of the AI podcasts and I'm learning. And like the fact that my hands are busy is actually helping me absorb more. And I'm at the point in my life where I don't resent that time because it's just what I'm doing is part of getting smarter. It's part of keeping my household running. And I think that is, it sounds really dumb, but it's like part and parcel to the happiness piece. If you're sitting there like, I can't believe I'm fully long. Why doesn't my son help? Like these are his dumb jeans and I'm so tired of folding them. Like, yes, he should be helping me fold his jeans, but it's all in the mindset and how you approach it. And if you're approaching it like, this is keeping my hands busy, I'm actually really absorbing. This is actually very relaxing and somewhat cathartic. And oh my gosh, when I'm done, I've done such a service to my future self who's going on a business trip tomorrow, but I'm going to come back and there's not going to be all this laundry. When you start to shift your mindset that way, just it really does start to leave breadcrumbs for what I believe is happiness. It's productivity, it's happiness, it's contribution. I don't know. It's part of a system that just works for me, but it requires that mental shift from sort of resentment of the process to just kind of a love of it.
Do you set the mini goals, or as I tell, like it's, there's a consistency thing, and how for a lot of people get burnt out as, especially if you're at a startup, right? There's this goal of, we're either going to get sold or someone's going to, buy us on, or we're going to get huge or whatever the case. Like there's some big, goal that you're getting to. There's whatever High Rocks championship stuff. I always think family's easy, right? I want them all to be happy and, blue skies, rainbows and unicorns stuff, which is easier said than done. But for me, it's like, what are the mini goals that you put in place so that you're always finding something to work the problem? I mean, you're talking about the laundry, but do you give yourself a pile of kind of mini goals as you go to get to those hurdles?
But I'm not as focused on outcome in those goals. So a lot of the times my quarterly goals, my monthly goals, even down to my weekly goals for work, which I write down on Sunday nights, are much more about, I try to use the framing, success this week looks like to me. And there's always a component of that, which is, again, what's going to help my future self? So if I look forward to my board meeting, which is in, I don't know, a month and a half, what can I do this week? That one component of what I do this week is going to help that future self show up better in that board meeting. So it's always this mix of short versus long-term thinking. So on one side of this, I have these little cards is, like long-term things coming up, like a board meeting, like you have some investor meeting, you have RKO, you have these things coming up. And then you can actually scope your list of 3 things. This week will be successful if I do these 3 things, but in light of what's coming later. And that to me is how every week on Sundays, I can ground myself into thinking about what I need to accomplish and what will make this week really successful, but with the mindset of what's coming 2 months from now. Because what I used to do when I first became a CEO is I would get so wrapped up and mired in the firefighting and the day to day. And what I learned over I'm on year 7 now, is that there's always 7 piles of sort of smoldering fires around you. And it's about, okay, how do I keep all these sort of contained and notice where one's starting to spark, but also think about what it's going to look like 3 months from now and what that spark could potentially turn into, which is a blaze. You want to prevent that. It's all about prevention. And so having that kind of long, short-term view has really helped me on a weekly basis.
I'm curious, have you always been like this? Like I'm hearing themes of like process, clarity, goal setting, hard work, right? You've created your own process, checking in on Sundays to look at your week ahead, right? That are allowing you to optimize your efficiency and productivity, right? How can you set your mindset when you're doing a task, you're actually using it to grow and develop yourself? So I'm curious, have you always been like this? Or was there a time when you had, a moment when you recognized you wanted to make a change and you developed this skill set?
It's a great question. I think there's sort of a twofold to that. I think during my time at Smartsheet, I became a much more structured thinker because we were dealing in spreadsheets. We were building in columns and rows. It was really interesting how it started to almost change the way my brain worked because everything we were doing was in Smartsheet. We were managing all of our work in Smartsheet. All of my things that I needed to manage across my life were in Smartsheet because we were testing it. And I think it really did add this weird structured component to how I think about things. It started to change the way that my brain works. So I think that was one really key thing just from thinking and working and operating in a mindset where you were constantly trying to put things into templates of process. I think you can have brain mechanism changes like that. So I think that's one. I think the other one is honestly just operating in a world in which you have a lot of balls in the air. You've got to get really smart and strategic about prioritizing which ones stay up and which ones fall. And then I think from a fitness perspective, I've had a couple of really big gut punches where 2 years ago, my husband and I competed in mixed doubles in Nice, and it was the most I've ever trained. And I sacrificed a ton. And when I say a ton, I mean, it was mostly time with my kids that I sacrificed, whether it was early mornings, late evenings, trying to get these workouts in. And our result was super mediocre. And I remember sitting in the bathtub that night after Worlds and just being so devastated, not with the results, because it was world champs. We were still in the top 1%. I think we were 5th in the world, but with the fact that I had miscalculated my personal balance in terms of what was going to be okay for me. In that scenario, the only way the sacrifice was worth it is if we had an extraordinary outcome. And what I've learned is you cannot count on the extraordinary outcome. So you better be damn sure you're okay with the sacrifices you're making. Now I'm much more balanced about how I approach the sacrifices for work or for my family or for training and across all 3, because you just can't count on the sacrifice paying out. So a great example is, Sean, what you talked about. When you're running a growth stage startup, you're going for the big, you want to eventually someday go IPO. You want to have that big moment. But what you have to make sure you're doing is if the only way your sacrifices are worth it is if you get to that extraordinary outcome, you're going to have a ton of regret and resentment. And so I think that really changed how I look at things as well. You just have to be looking at your day to day and make sure, regardless of the outcome, are you happy with the sacrifices and bets you're making?
Yeah, I think making sure the journey is fun, because I think, I think there's several of us that want to convey that message, and hopefully people will go on the same way, because I think I've been in that same place where you kind of put all the eggs in the basket and the result was the goal. And you kind of realize later that you're I got so into the result and I didn't get what I wanted. And so I was devastated, but I'm always curious, what if I did get what I wanted, if I was that devastated over what is really, to your point, a marginal difference that really only you care about? Would I have had regret anyway? Right? Did it just highlight and actually make things better going forward? Because I realize now I put a lot of time into, well, not a lot, but like you, I'm a Sunday night. That's kind of interesting. I'll have to text you sometime and be like, what you got this week? Because I go through and kind of what do I want to get done at work, but also what does my training look like this week in relation to work, like trying to balance all that stuff. And what do I got going on physically? Because I'm, older than you. So, like, how did I recover from last week? Well, because there's that change, right? Because I don't want to pile on, to your point, being upset with myself if I can't do what I had originally planned 4 weeks ago or whatever my coach had me 4 weeks ago doing. And I just, I can see it coming. Like, you just need to get in front of it. And I like the macro thing. I think that's actually kind of cool, Maria, with everything we have going on, saying, what are 3 things? Like, that's pretty simplistic. I think that's a pretty cool thing. If I get through the week and do these 3 things,
it was successful. And it also gives you so much more freedom, because now you're focused on the right thing and you wrote it down. And I've found that to be true over and over again, particularly as we all beat ourselves up for time management, or, I should have spent more time on this or that. And you nailed it. You're nailing it because you get out of the.
Holly calls them type A plus personalities.
Yeah.
Is that you, Holly? Is that yours? We need to trademark it if we didn't.
Type A plus, yes, that is my vernacular, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So like,
and Maria sounds like she fits the bill for sure. You want to get everything you can out of life experiences without sacrificing yourself. And that what you have mentioned on the value of the experience over the outcome, that's definitely something that we love to work with our clients on, which requires coaching sometimes, right? Again, it sounds simple, but it's not always easy to decouple our attachment to an outcome or an expectation and understand what it takes to live in the moment and enjoy the experience.
I actually think it's one of the biggest parts of having a coach or a partner at home, somebody that's not part of your process. I think that's the biggest thing, because when you focus on a goal, especially when those goals get pretty high up there, you get really focused on them, and you need somebody to kind of be like, are you having fun? And, like, it seems like such a simple question. If your answer is like, no, like, I'm not enjoying any of the last workouts, except maybe those, 1800 meter, track workouts. Like, that's, that having that perspective is super, super critical.
Yeah. And I think of perfectionism as the enemy. And it's just a standard thing I remind myself of often, because perfectionism, anything on my more list, is not going to get there if I require it to be perfect. Because when you start something new, you're going to make mistakes. And that's part of being new at something. And I think across work as well, the growth in your brain happens when you stretch yourself, and the growth in the business happens when you stretch yourself. And so stretching yourself requires just an absolute rejection of perfectionism. And I think it's true in training as well. If you want to really do something new, something you've never done, you have to accept that most of your training is not going to be perfect. Most of your outcomes are not going to be perfect, and really focus on I will be successful if. So for example, if you're somebody that wants to run faster, depending on your age, depending on how long you've been running. I mean, Holly, you've done this forever, but you might have to run easier to make sure you hit your paces in your 1 fast workout a week, let alone 2. Like, maybe you'll get 2, but if you're running too hard in your medium length runs, which is what I was doing, I was never able to hit the paces, which meant I never got better. It's the same thing for work. It's the same thing for family. If having family dinner is important to me, you better be damn sure there's likely going to be 1 course. It's going to be like a vat of pasta. But guess what? The point was, we all sit down and we look at each other in the eye 1 time a day while we share a meal. The meal part isn't the important part. It's the experience part. So figuring out that's sort of why I like this is what success looks like, because you hone in on the thing. What is the thing? It's the meal. It's not the food. So that always helps me across all 3 vectors, because when you do it at work, you do it at home, you do it with your training, it starts to become a mantra that fundamentally shifts how you think about
What's a tip that you could give to people to maybe help them move more in that line? And I'm asking because I can see compulsion with athletes, people that want to be perfectionistic, right? Because they believe that's what they need to do to accomplish their goals. And failure can be a scary thing on many layers, even though when we have those stretch assignments, stretch goals, stretch workouts, and we see what we're capable of, if we miss, we're learning a lot, right? Which can actually make us stronger, better, faster in the future. But if somebody's listening and they're having a really hard time understanding how they can let that perfectionistic tendency go, what advice would you give them?
Specific workouts where I am focused on, I call it my governor. Like the workout is about staving off my governor. And it is purely for pushing myself into areas that feel new, because that's where change happens. And so it's not even about the paces. It's about, okay, I feel my governor approaching. And like, I have all these really weird, probably psychologically definable tricks. Like I imagine my governor approaching and I send them to go finish laundry or like go finish writing emails. Like in my head, I send them off to go do tasks so that I can continue at the pace. And I just tell myself like, this is really hard. I want to quit. That governor is approaching. The whole point of this workout is to stave them off as long as possible, but the result is failure. Like if you fail in that workout, that was the whole point, because the point was a mental exercise. It was, how do I push myself beyond what I've done before and start to feel comfortable with failure? But more importantly, how to really feel the pain cave of trying to stave off the psychological component of wanting to quit. And so I think if you approach certain workouts where that's the point, that's the objective, you sort of failed if you don't fail, which makes failure
It's
the
funny.
objective.
My favorite workout to give people kind of this time of year, depending on the summer, is the hardest 5K you can run. And over a period of 5Ks, how many times did you not finish the 5K? So now how many times did you actually go too hard to the point where you failed? And then was it a physical or mental? To your point, I guess, did they have enough laundry for the other me to go do while you were running? I'm going to try that at some point. But did you fail? Because you learn a ton from that. Like, literally that's the pace you can't run. But it's interesting because I think type A plus people or type A people, they definitely don't want to come back. If you're like, I want you to go run your last 5K minus 15 seconds per mile or 20 seconds per mile, they won't do it because they're like, well, I didn't finish the 5K. Secretly, you're like, there's no way you could have finished the 5K. I knew you weren't going to finish the 5K. You either cheated or lied, right? One of the two. So I think that's a super cool thing, Maria, like learning to fail. And from that failure comes actually a ton of education. I mean, in the stretching yourself part.
Yes. And I think
We've all done it, right? PR or ER, right? I mean, like that's when you learn the most. You PR or ER, or for those that on the back in the tri days, Holly, like Kona, it was either Kona or 17 hours. We used to say, like you're going to completely annihilate yourself and then have to crawl in. And I think you learn those are the races. You go back and you're like, I might have failed on what I thought my goal was, but like that served me for so many years of knowing when the end was near. I couldn't send him to do any more laundry or emails. Like that was really the end.
It's such an interesting thought exercise because when I'm traveling for races, I imagine my governor's coming and they're at home though. They have to get in the car, drive to the airport, get on the plane, but they're coming for me. So I got to get this race done before they get here. And like, I literally have these hijinks I play in my mind that have been honed now over many of these workouts where they get me or they don't. And it's a really interesting way to figure out where is failure. And if you don't push yourself to that, I struggled with that so much up until about a year ago. I wouldn't go for the paces, felt I couldn't hit the pace. It was just like a mental block.
I mean, it takes time to develop for sure. And definitely an interest and an appetite to want to push. I know speaking as a coach, it can be hard to encourage people to be comfortable with that amount of discomfort and to allow themselves to see their own potential. Some people are natural sandbaggers and they're more comfortable assuming where they are instead of exploring what's possible. And that's a very gentle and difficult conversation to encourage. And everybody, I feel like, is on their own timeline with when that's appropriate for them to lean into or not.
Absolutely.
how comfortable they are being uncomfortable. And then when they get to a point where they reach what they think was their goal, I think that's always an interesting point too, because do they be like, good, I think I'm done being uncomfortable because the next goal is, means more time there, or they're like, check it out. Now look what I can do type of thing.
And that is so true for work at a startup in particular. Some days it's just, I have this group of really incredible women CEO friends, and the mantra that we always use in our group chats is just keep going. Just keep going, keep going. It's become this sort of thing that we say, and it sounds so simple, but there are so many days where you just have to get through it. You have to keep going because there's such high highs and such low lows. And there's a bunch of memes that are sort of like, in a growth stage startup, one day you think you're taking over the world, and then like the very next day or even like 2 hours later, you feel like, you're dead in the water. So you have to learn how to manage that and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And that's where you want that expansion of what's possible. Because again, if you hit, you're always hitting target. The joke with the sales team is the reward for eating your pie is more pie. Like if you hit your targets and quotas, like your year over year percentage growth target is not going to go down. It's just going to go up. So you have to want that and really be a personality type that's excited about that kind of stretch.
So as you get near the end, because you have a basketball team with 2 subs, you have a growth startup, and global high rocks. What are a time hack or two that you have that you use besides the goals? I'm always baffled at the amount of stuff you have going on.
Let's see. The obvious ones first. I'm super lucky. I have a gym in my garage and I work hybrid. So I have an office in Seattle, but also work from home. And so I can pop out. The last office we actually had ergs in the office because I brought them in. So just this idea of being able to, some people don't have, I'm the CEO. So if I have a 30-minute break and I'm in the office and want to get on the erg and do this, I'm notorious for it. I can do it. A lot of folks are like, oh, that would not go over well, or I'd have to ask permission. I don't have that. So I have a lot of privilege from that perspective, from a flexibility standpoint. I do get up really early. I get up before 5. I have a lot of like women hacks. Like if you look, I've got like the concealer and the lip gloss and the protein shake and the, bag of mangoes.
Yes.
There's just so much that you can quickly do and not have to fully get ready that's possible when you are working from home. I do a lot of
travel hack. The other one I was going to ask you, put it in there. When you're traveling and training and eating, any hacks there? Because I find that can be difficult.
I'm kind of a meal prepper. I got to say, I pack my lunch when I go to the office. Always pack food for airplanes. And I have to tell you, my team has come to terms with this. And I'm not saying this is good or bad. There's probably huge downsides to this. And as a IO PhD, you're going to be like, you're missing out on a lot of relationship things. But my team knows when I'm traveling for work, if I land at 6 and they're all going to dinner at 6:30, I'm probably going to go to the hotel gym and like do an hour run and then show up like in my workout clothes and have like do the end with them of the dinner. I just don't do a lot of long social engagements professionally.
I think that all comes down to the best way I put it. And you had the time, when you had the in or out, probably the mantra I use a lot is, when you say yes to something, you say no to something else. When you say no to something, you get to say yes. So I think that's that time management thing. You can't say yes to everything and be happy. It just crushes you.
Absolutely.
Any other tips before we close it up into the whole, you smiled the whole time. So we got the happy part. That's good.
Meet and great people. So one of the things on my more list this year is to make one new friend. And I put it there, not because it sounds ridiculous, but you really do have to have something that focuses you on community and focuses you on a world outside the people you already know. That is a huge input to longevity. So I just think trying to think about the full scope of life, even just the 3 things that we talked about. Social life is probably the lowest on my scale, which is why I was like, just one friend. I can make a friend. Like I have 12 months. It's possible. But I think just having conversations like this and reminding yourself that everybody's going through the same thing. Everyone's trying to put the pieces together, and opening yourself up to a little bit of vulnerability that might catch someone in a way that they want to make that connection to, I think is really important. So I appreciate you asking me on.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate it. I'll just add to that. The best lesson I learned from a guy who's no longer here, but just is like, we're so lucky to do this shit. Like, just remember every time, you're having a bad workout or things are tough or you have, all this stuff going on, how freakishly lucky we are to get out and play like that. No matter how bad the day is, someone would trade places with you.
Well,
Super glad to be in place with you. So I appreciate you coming on. We will tag Maria on there. You can reach out to her. If you want to know more about High Rocks, you can find her. And if you find a full picture of her somewhere, you'll realize how impressive it is when she pulls or pushes the sled around because she's teeny. And they don't change the sled size for the human. It's one size sled. So you can see how impressive it is. But I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks
Thank
for having
you.
me.